From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., the Congressional Report, with your host, Iowa Congressman Tom Latham.
This country is based on farms, on small businesses, and creating jobs and opportunities. That is the lifeblood of this nation.
And now your host, Congressman Tom Latham.
Hello. The brave men and women who serve in the armed forces deserve the respect and support of every single American. Our troops and their families sacrifice so much so that we can enjoy the freedoms central to our democratic way of life. For over 70 years, the United Services Organization has bridged the gap between the American people and our troops, conveying support and appreciation. Joining me today is John Hanson of the USO to talk about the organization and what we can do to support our troops. Thank you very much for being with us,
it's
John.
Great to be with you, Congressman.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you come from? And
I grew up in Alabama. I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I moved to Washington in 1979. I worked for the National Governors Association, the American Legion. I also worked for a while at the Department of Veterans Affairs before joining the USO 8 years ago.
Tell us about the history of the USO. When did all this start? 70 years ago, I guess. And,
Franklin Roosevelt, in early 1941, in January 1941, realized the military was growing, bases were going up all over the country, and there needed to be a way to support the morale and welfare for those troops moving to what had been towns without much military presence. So he called together 6 organizations and who'd been active in World War I, and asked them to combine their services to form the USO. So the USO came into being in early February of 1941, almost a year before Pearl Harbor.
You know, everybody thinks about the USO as, entertaining the troops and all that. Can you tell us about some of the people who, over time, that really took a lead role as far as helping our troops?
Well, for years, Bob Hope was the face of the USO, and he took tours over from 1941. His first show was in May of 1941 in California. He didn't much want to do it, didn't know why he was asked to do it, and once he did it, he understood what a great audience it was. And he went all over the world during World War II and then in Korea and up to the first Gulf War. He performed in Saudi Arabia during the first Persian Gulf War. Wayne Newton has taken a number of tours, Gary Sinise. We've had country performers. Toby Keith goes every spring for us and takes a couple of weeks. And he will only go if he's assured that he'll get to small forward operating bases. Wow. He'll do the big shows, but he'll take his guitarist out to some small remote areas that don't get to see these shows. Scarlett Johansson has gone for us, Robin Williams, Lewis Black. It's an array. Brad Childress, the coach of the Minnesota Vikings, went on a tour just a few months ago, and he was walking down a line of service members in Afghanistan thanking them for their service and got to his son and wasn't expecting to see him.
Wow.
And we have a great piece of video of a full minute-long hug between father and son. But that's just football coaches, football players, performers, entertainers, authors. We're sending over members of the National Cartoonist Society in a few months to go over. They just had a successful tour earlier in the year. And they just bring a smile to people's faces. It breaks up the routine. But entertainment's about 11% of what we do. It's 100% of what people know.
Right.
But it's as far as what we do, it's about 11%. Hundreds of shows, tens of thousands of troops entertained. But we do so much more than that.
Yeah. Just to stay on that subject, though, do you recruit these people, or do they come and volunteer, or how do you? It
works both ways. Once we get somebody, it's hard to get rid of them. They love the experience so much. But we have an active recruiting staff in our office in Arlington, Virginia, and agents and publicists come to us as well to see how they can get on a USO tour. We don't pay them a dime. We pay their way over. We house them. We feed them. And then we beat them up for about 10 hours a day for a week or two at a time, and they keep coming back for more.
Well, you said the organization is so much more than 11% of its entertainment. What are some of the other things that you do as far as the link between the American people and the troops?
Well, we operate more than 160 centers around the world. We have 20 or so in the United States. Most of them are at airports. We're building new USO centers. We just opened a USO center, Fort Riley, Kansas. We have a big USO center, two big USO centers, as a matter of fact, at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. We have a center at Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Drum, New York. A lot of these places where troops are training and constantly deploying, we try to get them before they deploy so their families know they have a place to go on those bases. And if you've gone through a major airport in the United States, you've probably seen a USO center. We have centers in the Pacific and in Europe, and we've got 3 centers in Kuwait, 3 in Iraq, and we're about to open our 2nd in Afghanistan.
Wow. How do you work to help the families stay in touch with their soldiers, or is that a major?
We see ourselves as a bridge between the American public and troops. When I was in the military during Vietnam, I would go to the USO, and occasionally we would be able to make a shortwave phone call home for a couple of minutes, and it was a great thing. You'd call, and I think Senator Goldwater started this system of ham radio operators in the United States. And so there was somebody between you and who you were calling, and of course you had to say over when you were done, and they had to remember to do it, or the conversation stopped. These troops today expect a phone connection somehow. So we've provided that. We've passed out millions of international calling cards, so they can get to a phone, they can call home. Those cards, though, especially in Southwest Asia, are worth somewhere between a quarter and a third their face value. They have to go through so many different countries and tariffs. A 300-unit card might not last 100 minutes there. Also, the communication backbone was based on the military, and they use it for other stuff. So we, just over a year ago, bought time on a satellite, and at every one of our USO centers in Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Iraq, we offer a clean and clear telephone and internet connection back home. We designed it for the internet connection, but we discovered that troops like to call home. So about 200,000 phone calls a month are being made back here. We pay for that. The troops don't pay a dime for it. The internet connection is very robust. We've had troops able to be in a delivery room back here when a child has been born. Troops help their kids with homework now. We do what we've always done. We just do it a lot faster now.
That is a tremendous service. How is all this funded? Is it government?
The USO is a private nonprofit.
Right.
About 96% of our money comes from the public. We have 2 million active donors. We get a small amount from the government to help us with some of our programs in Southwest Asia. And that amounts to about 4% of what we do. And every dime we get from the federal government helps us in the war zone. And it helps us free up our funds to operate our centers in the rest of the world. And it helps us keep those centers in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait open 24 hours a day. One way this war is different than the one I served in is that you got nothing to do. If you're on base, you're on base. You can't go anywhere.
Right.
And the USO provides an outlet. Our centers there have large screen televisions to watch movies, to watch the American Forces Network. We have a music room so people can play Guitar Hero. We have a room where people can record videos of themselves reading a children's book, and then we send the video and the children's book back home so kids can read along with their parents. It's been a very powerful program for us.
That really is tremendous to be able to have that contact back at home, and the entertainment part of it there, but certainly to be able to contact your family back at home, it really fills a huge void for a lot of families at home, but also certainly the trooper over there.
This is a very married military, maybe our most married since the Civil War. And they're deployed an awful lot, as you know. It's a real grind. So we do what we can to shorten the distance.
Yeah, we have about 3,400 Iowans and National Guard being deployed, this summer, and so it's a real stress, obviously, and the tempo that has changed so much for those Guards people.
And especially for Guard and Reservists, because they don't have a military infrastructure back home. Their families aren't on bases.
Right.
As you know, they leave their businesses or their high school coaching jobs, and we do everything we can to try to keep it on an even keel.
There's Operation Enduring Care. What is that? Would you want to tell us?
Sure. It's a great program. It started with our outreach to troops who went to Landstuhl Military Hospital in Germany after they were wounded or hurt in Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the goals of the military is to get somebody who's wounded off the battlefield and out of the country to someplace that's not as dirty. And so these folks arrive in Germany with just the uniforms they have, and those were cut off of them, and they're in the hospital with their hospital gown. We started providing some clothes for them, some backpacks or some duffel bags, just so they could have a little bit of dignity while they were recovering from their wounds. The program's been expanded, though. We are about to build two brand new USO centers, the largest in the world. Each will be about 25,000 square feet. One at the new Walter Reed out of Bethesda Hospital in Maryland, the other at the new Army Community Hospital at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where most of the troops transit through. We will build these centers as a place for families to gather. A lot of people don't understand. If you're in one of these military rehabilitation hospitals, it's not for a week or two. You might be there for a year and a half. And their world's been turned upside down. Often their families have to leave their jobs or their homes to come here and stay with them. And right now there's no place for them to gather, no real place for them to get together. And we will provide a place for them to do that. We'll also provide training for spouses, family members, and the troops so they can reintegrate. It's one thing for a troop to go back to Iowa. It's another thing for a troop to go back to Iowa physically or maybe emotionally different. And we're doing everything we can to help with that transition the best way we can.
Well, and will be a tremendous service. I mean, having visited families at the hospitals here and to see, they're in a hospital setting all the time. If they had a chance to meet with their loved one to be able to, interact in a different environment would be extraordinarily important.
And the needs aren't always easy to guess. We assumed they'd like a place to gather. A lot of spouses said they'd like a business center so they could work on the paperwork or taxes. Right now they have to go outside to a commercial business center to do that because there's no way for them to do that. And they've asked us to make sure we include a place for them to do laundry. There are a lot of things we might not have guessed if we hadn't asked the customers. And so this will be a $100 million effort. It will take us a year and a half or so to build these centers. We intend to endow them forever and to raise enough money so there's never a need to raise another dime to create programs there.
Do you have a special fundraising effort going on just for these facilities?
The Operation Enduring Care fundraising effort is just kicking off. We will have a new public service announcement that will start airing this fall. And we're encouraging Americans to go to our website to leave a message of support for wounded warriors. If they want to donate there, that's fine, but we will hand deliver messages of support to wounded warriors as they come in from the public. They just go to USO.org, click on the site, they can leave a message and be done with it or get more involved if they like.
Where do you get the needs of the families? I mean, do you get a lot of feedback from the families themselves and the soldiers? Or
we ask a lot of questions,
right.
And we learned early on that guessing doesn't work. So we ask questions. Some troops said that at these new centers they wouldn't mind having some dogs, just an animal to pet. That may or may not be workable, but it was an interesting request, and we took it very seriously. When families get here with children, there's really no place for child care. And the troops told us they want a place that's open 24 hours because when they're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's no place to go. So that pretty much changed how we're going to design these things because we can't just have a center, we have to have a safe way to get to the center. So we're constantly surveying the troops and their families to make sure that we provide to them exactly what they want.
It's great that you listen like that and are able to respond. It really is. What do you do? Anything special? Have all the holidays that troops are off in a foreign country? Or, I mean, is there a special role for the USO in holidays?
We get so many emails and letters from troops in countries who've had a Thanksgiving dinner when they thought they would miss one at the USO Center. One came in last year of a soldier stationed in Italy, which doesn't sound so bad, but if you're away from your family on Thanksgiving, and he just happened to drop in the USO and there was a turkey dinner, and suddenly he was home. But we do that with every major holiday, and we provide as much of a home feeling as we can. One of the center directors, who's now in our Grafenwehr, Germany center, told me when I was on a USO tour a few years ago, and she came up to me right before Christmas and she said, "I've got to get back because I have to make cakes." And I said, "Fine." And she said, "It's not about the cakes. When I go back and make cakes, troops come back and ask if they can help. So it's about making the cakes. For a while, for an hour, they're in the kitchen with their mom, licking the beaters and stirring the cakes and putting on the icing." She said, "The cakes are great, but it's just the process. It takes them home for a while." My experience in Thailand in the 1970s was that when I went into the USO, I wasn't in Thailand anymore. I was in an American place with American people, with American food, and it was like leaving a movie matinee and discovering it's daylight outside. As soon as I walked outside, I realized, well, I'm not home, but that was a nice break.
Yeah. Are there programs specifically for families themselves, or is it directed just at the troops? Or
you will not hear anybody at the USO today talking about supporting troops without saying "and their families." We know how important it is. When these wounded warriors come back, the first thing they ask is how their families are. They don't. Sure. They want to know how the unit is and how their families are, and then once that's settled, they start rehabilitating. We have a 3-year, about to be a 4-year partnership with Sesame Street. We've sent the Sesame Street characters a live show all over the world, all over the United States and all around the world. And they designed a program to help children deal with the deployments. Elmo, for the first one, let everybody know that his father was deployed, and he knows what it's like to be lonely, and it's okay to be sad. They had a special program about when a parent comes home changed. We work with a fellow named Trevor Romaine, who works with kids, younger kids between, say, 7 and 12, who often put up with moving around with their family, so they don't have any roots, and sometimes they get bullied. And he's got a special program to help these kids deal if a parent is severely injured or is killed overseas. He has some programs. We work with a great another organization called TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, that helps families of survivors, and we help them when we can. And we have a USO presence at Dover, Delaware, at Dover Air Force Base, which has assisted in every dignified return since before 9/11. And every time a plane comes back with remains, the USO is there, helping the families, helping the volunteers at the Air Force Base deal with that repatriation.
That's a tremendous service, and because the more deployments we have, you see the bigger impact on the families and any kind of assistance you can, and the unfortunate results sometimes with the wounds that folks come back with. If you can just be of assistance to the family, it's extraordinarily important.
It's a goal of ours.
Well, and the kids, it really is important. Also important, I think, is the role you play as far as the morale for the troops themselves, and to really, I mean, that is a major part of them being effective in their jobs when they're deployed also. I don't know if you want to talk about your role as far as the morale and keeping our troops.
The reason I came to work for the USO was because of what the USO did for me 30-some years ago, almost 40 years ago now, I'm sorry to say. The USO is a deal changer for a lot of these troops. They're lonely. They don't know really where they are. And our services range from everything in, say, Korea or Germany to teaching them about the society they just moved to, teaching them a little bit about the language, about the culture, where they are, so they don't feel so alone, and so they feel more comfortable going out and touring around and learning more, to these sort of nonstop breaks we offer in the war zone. Sometimes very few troops actually see a USO show, but our USO centers were visited 7.5 million times last year. The centers are the place where you go to send an email home, to read a book, to watch a movie, to take a nap, to get out of the barracks. to get out of the tent you might be living in or the plywood shack you might be housed in, just to take a break. It's a cool, well-lighted place where you can do anything from nothing to get very involved in activities. And you're absolutely right. These people aren't on duty 5 days a week. They're on duty 7 days a week, and there's an enormous amount of stress on them, and we do what we can to relieve that. And they've learned that they can come to the USO and relax. And all of our volunteers overseas are troops. We obviously can't rely on the local citizenry in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kuwait. So our centers are run by typically two staff people, and the rest are volunteers. And those volunteers are the people we serve.
You've got worldwide facilities, and you think, I think most people think about the USO in combat zones only. Are there different roles that you play in areas of the world that maybe there's no war going on, but is there a different role there in those facilities, and what kind of a role would they play?
Well, our slogan is until everyone comes home, and as long as we have a military, the people in the military aren't home, they're somewhere else. So we provide that touch of home for troops, whether there's in times of war or peace, and that's vital, especially in some isolated tours like in Korea where you can't have your family with you, or if it's an accompanied tour and you're away from the rest of your family. It's the USO provides that link back home. I learned to process film. I hope some of your viewers remember film. I learned to process film when I was at a USO center on Guam in 1972. It was either that or sit on my bunk and wonder what I was going to do next. So it was an extremely important distraction for me. But after Hurricane Katrina, we got a story from one of our centers in Mayport, Florida. A sailor showed up with his fiancée, and he said, "We've got to get married." And at first, the woman at the counter said, "That's not really my problem." But it turns out they had a marriage license. They were planning to get married in a couple of weeks, but there was another hurricane coming in, and the Navy solution to the problem was to deploy him the next day. Well, his fiancée had just arrived, and she was suddenly going to be in Mayport with nothing. So the center director got a justice of the peace on a speakerphone. One of the volunteers fashioned a ring. The wedding rings were back with his parents. Fashioned wedding rings out of some paper clips. They performed the ceremony.
Out of paper clips?
Paper
really?
clips. The center director was a notary public. She notarized the license. Then the spouse suddenly was able to get military benefits. He was able to be deployed with some comfort. And then when he got back, they got married properly. Our center staff, we operate 160 some centers. We have 500 staff around the world, and that includes probably 40 people here in the Washington National Capital area. So we're staffed very thinly. We have probably 10,000 volunteers who help make everything happen. And every single day at some USO center somewhere in the world, they solve a problem they never anticipated.
Hey, we always think of the USO during wartime. Is there and all the shows and everything that go to the troops over there, do you do the same thing in peacetime? Absolutely.
We just go to a different place. We'll when these wars are over, and we hope they're over quickly.
Right.
When these wars are over, we will reassess and move our assets around to where the troops are. And there are going to be a lot of troops still in Kuwait. There will still be troops in Iraq, and there might be some in Afghanistan. Different mission, but we will go to wherever the troops are. In Europe, just until a few years ago, the entire force structure in Europe was based pretty much on a Cold War structure. And with the opening of Eastern Europe, a lot of military installations have moved east, and we've had to move with them. The drills are different, the training's different, but the needs really don't change. The morale needs are essential. And the Pentagon learned a long time ago that it's better to have somebody that's not part of the government do it than somebody part of the government. As you may know, the USO almost went away twice, once in 1947 and once after the Korean War. And the Pentagon conducted a study and said if we got rid of the USO, we just have to build it all over again. We provide a service that the troops recognize as a gift from the American public, not from the American government.
And it's very important, I think, to the troops themselves. I fly back and forth almost every weekend, and going through the airports, and you hear the announcement that troops can go to the USO centers at a lot of the airports. Tell us about what the role is there and how does that work?
There are people who are able to join airline frequent flyer clubs and the special clubs. I'm not one of those people. The USO clubs at these big airports, troops travel by commercial air more than they do military air, and their travel arrangements are usually awful, and they have outrageously long layovers. So the USO centers at those airports are places for troops and families and children to be able to relax between flights. They don't have to worry about their luggage. They don't have to worry about being hassled out in the waiting area. They can get a snack. They can watch a movie. They can take a nap if they've got a long layover and there's somebody there who will get them to their flights or make better connections for them. A lot of troops miss their connections because of the way air travel is. And the USO works with the airlines to make sure troops get to where they're going. So they are essentially an ambassador's club for troops, a comfortable place that we provide for troops to relax.
That is a great service, I can assure you. And how many volunteers do you have? Are there people that are not employed with the USO?
It's volunteers way outnumber our staff. We have somewhere between 10 and 20,000 volunteers around the world.
Really?
And we're going to be calling on the public as these wounded warriors go home. We're going to be calling on the public to play an active part in the reintegration, get them jobs, get them a place to live, welcome them home. Do the things that any good volunteer would do to take care of people who've defended them. So in states where we don't have locations, we have plenty of opportunities to welcome these troops back.
That's great. We have about a minute left here, I think. But tell us about how Iowans can help the USO. Is there a website you can go to? What would be the best way?
You can learn a great deal about the USO by going to our new website at uso.org, uso.org. You can find out where centers are located, what programs we offer, what specific programs they might want to support, or they can support the USO generally. As I mentioned earlier, they can send a message of support to a wounded warrior, and we will print that off and hand deliver it to those folks. They can they'll see where our tours are going and where our activities are, and in places where we aren't, and we don't have any centers in Iowa. But there are a lot of troops who are going to be coming back to Iowa, and they're going to need the help of the communities to get back into the swing of things. And we hope that, and I know Iowans, and I know that they'll be there to help them out.
I just want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Congressman, thank you so much.
And I hope folks will support the USO and make sure that you can follow through with your mission and even make it better and better, because it's so important for our troops. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The United States Services Organization has taken a global scope in its mission to convey the gratitude and support of the American people to our men and women in uniform. The services provided by the USO go far beyond entertainment. The organization truly helps our soldiers stay connected. I'd like to thank my guest, John Hanson, and I hope you'll tune in next time on the Congressional Report.
From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., this has been the Congressional Report with Iowa Congressman Tom Latham. Have a question, comment, or concern? Congressman Latham wants to hear from you.